Make sure you got a good, concrete plan in your own mind. It's going to change. It will definitely change as you talk to investors. You might want to talk to a lawyer briefly about, what is it that I need to have, in my toolbox as I'm going to knock on doors. Even if you're going to friends and family, some of the toughest fights that you have to kind of unpack sometimes or when people have expectations is in the friends and family round and it's not been documented, and then you're losing energy when you should be doing liftoff. Let's get you investor ready. Don't have these expectations. This is how these initial things work. You got lots of different opportunities out there. What they're looking for is, why should I be putting time and effort into this? Why should I put the diligence in this? You have to, as an entrepreneur, look at it from that side.
Welcome to Forging the Future, and my guest today is Jeff Dodd, partner and attorney at Hunton Andrews Kurth. Thanks for being here today, Jeff.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and you're one of our primary sponsors, so thank you for that.
Absolutely. We're really thrilled to do it.
I think you're our first legal-oriented guest, and it's such an important topic, I think, for startups and founders, because it's an area that, many don't have that much experience in, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's going to be a lot of great advice today. I have my, School of Hard Knocks experience, and then you have your law firm experience. So, but let's start, talking a little bit about you, about yourself and your inspiration for, getting into law.
Well, so I've been practicing about 45 years, and I went to actually University of Houston Law Center, and actually there's 3 generations now. My father-in-law, I met my wife in law school, and then my daughter also went there. So we're pure Cougars. But I started practicing in 1979, and at that time there was not you didn't have the ecosystem that you have right now. But I was really fortunate to have a fantastic mentor, Eddie Rogers, who did work on venture-related deals and emerging companies and stuff like that. And just a great guy. And so I started doing that work, and it intrigued the heck out of me. And so just kept doing it. And so I've watched this ecosystem, and it's what's happened in the past 10 years is unbelievable. I mean, just mind-boggling to me, and it's fantastic. It's a great thing for the city.
Was there an early interest there before you got exposed to that in your first firm, or you just?
So at Woodard Hall, we Eddie really inspired a lot of that. But what was great about it, and I still say this to like the younger lawyers. If you're a younger lawyer and you're working with other young people who are, entrepreneurs who are trying to figure things out, and you're kind of moving along, there's a natural affinity, but also you're growing together, and it's exciting. It really is, and it's a good way to learn and to help. Obviously partners and everything else will be around, but you're going to have a lot of the primary exposure. So it was fantastic, and that's where I really got intrigued about working with technology companies and other startups and things like that. So that once that fire was lit, you don't put it out.
Was there any kind of stigma back then against legal? I mean, I think there's a lot of people who aren't big fans of lawyers, right? There's a lot of lawyer jokes. I'm sure you heard them all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, at least from my side, I feel like some things have changed in that area.
I think somewhat. I think that that's a great. So a lot of times what would be portrayed would be lawyers, bashing each other's heads in, or other, pulling all types of tricks and stuff like that. So, lawyers have been reviled for time out of mind. You could read The Bleak House by Dickens, and you'll see, legal professions had quite a reputation for some
There's
time.
that famous one, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe.
Yeah, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, and that sort of thing. Yeah, so we've had a rep like that. But I also think that, especially in this area, what we're talking about, people do look at lawyers as advisors, and also to help navigate certain things. And a lawyer can really help move things along, provide some connections, provide some advice that a lot of times if you're doing public company work or other type work, you're not really seeing that same sort of dimension. So yeah, I do think a lot has changed in terms of attitude, especially in the areas that we're talking about.
Because it's so important for startup founders to get that legal advice and protection. And then even if you're working with larger companies, there's usually a very, mature legal firm, or not internally, legal lawyers, and a lot of documents, and you can get lost in a hurry.
Well, we've given, one of the things that I would say about that I think, there have been lots of advances like we talked about in Houston in terms of the innovation ecosystem. But, one of the things that you don't have quite like you do in some more established areas like in Palo Alto or even in Austin, there's been a number of founders, they've had their exits, they're investing back in, and you have learning. You learn how deals are put together and put together well, and so both the entrepreneurs and the VCs or the angels kind of know what to do. And what you find is that's not quite yet here. And so it is part of an educating process, and that's going to be an important component to help things move a lot more swiftly. So we have a little routine we go through when we bring in someone, or an entrepreneur wants to, is talking about doing their first round, their seed or whatever, an angel round. We'll walk through kind of let's get you investor ready. Let's figure that out. Don't have these expectations. This is how these initial things work, and I'll go a lot, this level set, because it's important. Otherwise, you're kind of flailing around and not really knowing what to do. So that's one of the functions to make the process a heck of a lot easier.
So, do you focus on helping startups form their businesses, or do you get involved more when they're trying to raise capital?
It's a little bit of both. So our practice is kind of holistic. We do, we'll represent angels, investors, VC funds, that sort of thing. So we have that experience, and we also will work with founders when they're first getting started off. We have a startup package like a lot of firms do, and we'll spend time, to kind of, but we have to husband that, but so that they can kind of get that initial stage. And they typically will start putting together some things, show it to us, and then when they're getting around, when they're doing, kind of an angel round or friends and family, we help them on that, try to do it as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. And as they go through their successive stages, that's where we'll get more involved. And then if there's M&A or an exit, or there's something that we have to work on, we'll do that. But that's, there's a life cycle, and it's an investment.
As an entrepreneur, I know the importance of proactive legal advice. Hunton Andrews Kurth has been a leader for over 120 years, offering top-notch support in energy, finance, real estate, and retail. They handle problems like their own. Hunton Andrews Kurth, they get it done. So what does it mean to be an investor-ready company?
So, there are just a few simple things. One is that you have your corporate documents in order, that it looks like, because what you're doing is you're also, if you have your house in order, you're also going to have someone who's investing and say, okay, they're tending to business. They're not just pitching ideas, they're actually tending to business. So, corporate documents could be very simple, but those ready. Anything that you've gone out in terms of your first contracts or whatever, you put them all in order so that someone can get in there and get the deal, and then really spend the time on your business plan so that it looks like it is professional but also well thought out. And so that's what I mean by investor ready. It's just certain elements that someone says, okay, we know they're a startup, but they are also ready to do business.
So you're actually doing both legal and some essentially consulting.
Yes.
Right? Like you need to be doing this, and this.
Yes.
But startups also don't have a lot of money.
That's right.
They're also very needy. That's
yes.
why you have the consulting. But you guys are targeting at least some, as part of your firm,
yes.
startups.
Yes. So we do that. We have to be judicious about it. One of the partners, when I was a young associate, told me, he says, you can get all the legal business you want if you don't charge for it. So you got to keep that in mind too, and we got to keep the lights on. But yes, we do, and some of it just kind of comes naturally. We're not trying. The only way you can, just to be real crass about it, the only way you can really be successful and make any money in this is you have that longer time horizon. You're willing to make some judicious investments. If the entrepreneurs are listening to you and know what you're trying to bring to the table and are respectful of it, then it works out. And because you have to look for that whole life cycle in terms of their life. So we make that investment, but you have to put guardrails.
Mm-hmm. But why go through that pain?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great. Well, first of all, I'm kind of a geek at heart. I mean, I like listening to what people are trying to accomplish. I'm always impressed. Like you've judged the Rice Business Plan competition. I have, since it began. I really get a thrill. Just listening to the energy and the passion and the thoughtfulness on a lot of the pitches. That's not 100%, but a lot of them. But if you get that feeling from that's who you're talking with, and they're really into it, it really is a lot of fun to do. Like I say, you have to be careful about it, but I have to say it's a very enjoyable thing to do, and also like working with investors for the same reason, because they're pulling these things apart, trying to figure out, and their decision tree is you got lots of different opportunities out there. What they're looking for is why should I not? Why should I be putting time and effort into this? Why should I put the diligence in this? And so that you have to, as an entrepreneur, look at it from that side. How am I going to get them to justify doing that and spending their time and their effort? And so that's also what I mean by investor ready, having that attitude that yes, I know this is a serious thing for you too. And so it's a lot of fun. But yeah.
Well, I like that. First of all, the motivation, right? So same reason at SoftTech I didn't want to do SAP or something, even though I probably could have made a lot more money doing that. It just didn't hold any interest to me. But then also that longer term time horizon. Yeah. Essentially, if you can help these startup founders grow their business and help support them legally, then some number of them will turn into longer term clients.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And they'll turn into, they might sell, but they'll go do something else, and you work with them on that. Mm-hmm. You see them and their management teams, what goes on with them. It can be very, very fulfilling. And one of the things that I also wanted to just throw out, because I think you have a good long view on this. If you look over, I just said I've been doing this for 45 years. So there's a lot that's happened in Houston. It hasn't been as recognized for a long time as really the incredible innovative ecosystem and city it is. But if you just want to think about the energy industry, you can't find it. You can't get it. You can't do anything with that without enormous technological knowledge, know-how, and effort. Mm-hmm. And that has been, so we are an innovation culture. We've been there for a long, long time. And there are other elements of that too. Oil money helped do the medical center, build out some of those things, and also, I guess, Anderson Clayton or MD Anderson, the investments they made there. Well, now look at that. It's mind-boggling what they're working on. So those are the sort of things which get me very excited about this city, and also the companies that are working here and solving the next set of problems. And
you said you've seen a change in the last 10 years.
Yes,
right?
Yes. It's kind of this phase sort of thing where there was all the ingredients were there. One of the problems with Houston, of course, is the sprawl. You had pockets, but there wasn't that physicality, kind of a lot of centrifugal forces that kind of push things out. What we're seeing with what Rice has been doing, this corridor that's being built out, and if you think about it. So you had a long time ago, we had downtown, you had the movers and shakers and else, and they started spreading out. And back in the 20s and the 30s, you started seeing that corridor. If you drive up and down Main, you'll see all these buildings, and they're of a vintage that speaks that, yes, there was a lot of economic activity going back and forth down there, and that started spreading out too. And we're basically doing the same thing, and that's going to provide, I think, a lot more. Fertile soil for people running into each other, working with each other, bouncing ideas off, that sort of thing. And that ingredient hasn't been here until fairly recently. And so you're seeing that. You're also seeing some more investors, more interactions like that. Han has become incredible. We have also some other great, like the Goose Society and everything else. Lots of good things all those ingredients now are starting to coalesce. So, yeah, it's, I just wish I had another 45 years to see it all work out.
So what are some of the successful Houston startups that you've seen in your career?
When I was a younger lawyer, we had the opportunity at the firm I was at, Woodard Hall, which I'd mentioned before. It did the first round or two for what was then Gateway Computer. It became Compact. And the partner who was on that was Eddie Rogers. I worked on some peripheral things. Other lawyers did the thing. So I worked on it because I was actually working on a company that was a software company, a relational database management company that was a spin-off of some software from from NASA. And that didn't turn out as successful as Compact did. So that was pretty exciting. I also worked on some landmark graphics related.
Was it obvious that Compact had what it
Yes.
took at that time? You thought that was going to be, like this company's going to do something.
Yeah, it's funny. They famously kind of wrote out what they were going to do and how they're going to make it. And think about it at that time. I mean, the whole idea of being able to have a computer that you could carry around that would fit underneath an airplane seat, that's just boggled the mind in a way. And of course, you had others coming out and that, but you could tell that these guys knew, what they were doing, and that and what they were trying to answer for. It wasn't we're just building another box. They were trying to solve a particular problem for ordinary people, ordinary business people who could use that computing power. You just knew, and the venture capitalists, Seven Rosen knew it too.
Interesting. And then maybe some others.
Yeah, so landmark graphics is another great example. When I first started practicing, one of the first public offerings I worked on was this massive, crazy roll-up of oil and gas limited partnerships that used to be a thing way back in the early 80s. And what you'd go to these oil and gas companies, you see all these seismic logs, all these streams of paper, all posted along on the walls and things like that. And these petroleum engineers would be making decisions and looking at this, and the geologists and when you think about that, and the landmark graphics having the audacity to take that and digitize it and make it in a way that was that you could actually very quickly examine and look at the reservoir characteristics like that. Unbelievable. Again, that was a niche in the sense of, that wasn't going to be on, in everyone's hand, or they were going to carry it around, but it really was incredibly important to that industry. So again, you could tell they had it. If they could execute on that audacious idea and really take in that data, they had it, and they did.
Well, you have my mobile number, so when another Compact or landmark that's obvious to you comes across your desk, just make sure you give me a call.
Absolutely.
So you've seen a lot of these successful founders. What are some of the things they do, perhaps legally, that a founder who is looking for that level of success should be doing?
They think down several levels, and I'll give an example. If you are going to have equity incentive plans, which everyone does, everyone knows you got to have that. But also think about what that cap table is going to look like, and think about the rounds where the investors are going to make you reload on those equity incentives. Okay, you got to think that through, but you also have to think about what is the message that you're sending when you are giving these equity incentives. Yes, you can have vesting, time-based or whatever, but are there some KPIs, or are there some things that tie into your business plan so that you're telling people, look, this is where we're going. We might have to pivot. We might do a lot of things like you were talking about before. You never can tell what the future holds, but you have to think about, in a careful way, what is it that I'm sending and what am I trying to accomplish on things, everything from the equity incentive programs to how you structure, the compensation and the like because it's going to be pretty small at first, but you have to figure that. And then the final thing is that I'll just give a quick example. It's the average is like 2 to 2.5 years, depending on the round, between rounds. So you got to think, how am I going to, what is that runway going to look like, and how am I going to get there? Because all that time you spend fundraising and the like, how am I going to execute? And just think about time in a very creative way. Successful founders get that and understand, and they're not just shooting in all different directions. They show a discipline.
Well, listening to you, it's clear to me that really having a legal firm that understands this type of work, because you are having to address a lot of things that are maybe, you wouldn't just be able to download from LegalZoom or ask ChatGPT to give me a legal document, because there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of things that have to be also considered.
Yeah.
And then in my own experience when I'm talking to lawyers, what I see with founders, a mistake that they make is that they don't understand that the difference between the attorney providing the business advice and the attorney also providing the legal advice. And I think good attorneys make that differentiation.
Yes.
And founders sometimes just everything's gospel, and they don't understand that, well, your lawyer has an opinion on this, but this is really a business decision.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
How many shares to give or whatever the thing is. You can provide some guidance, but do you think founders should be pushing back on their attorney that way, or what's the balance? Exactly?
That's a great question. So I always try to tell founders, look, you need to get some good advisors in business. I mean, if I were a business person, then maybe you can come to me. I'm a lawyer, and so I can give you the benefit of what I've seen, but I am going to try to demark, and really suggest that you stress test it. So go talk to people who have been seasoned like you. I mean, that have seen a number of these things to get some advice about those things. I can give you some general ideas, but it's ultimately, you're going to have to. It's going to have to be forged in the crucible of business. It's not, not necessarily in the documents I do. So you and to be honest with you, you really want to show your clients that respect too, that they're, it is ultimately their lives, and you want to help them, but ultimately you want to execute on what they want to do, and so that's really important.
Well, even on the legal side, what I like in my attorneys is that they explain, like, this is why you want this. Mm-hmm. This is the risk you're taking by not having it.
Right.
It's up to you to decide. What are some of the emerging technologies that are coming out that maybe pose more of a legal challenge?
Well, AI is obviously on everyone's mind. In fact, I'm an author or co-author of 4 legal treatises. You can't find them on any bestseller list for sure. But one of them is that I co-authored with, actually he's a lawyer, but he's also a mathematician. And so we have some chapters on AI, and we've written some things to both the patent and trademark office and also the copyright office in commentary that, it's a real challenge from a legal standpoint when you have something that has emerging agency. I'll say that, not fully autonomous, of course, yet, but I mean it is getting to the point where you have tremendous legal issues there. We also are experimenting. All law firms are experimenting with forms of AI. Got to be very careful about that, because you're ultimately responsible. The lawyers are responsible for what goes out as work product from that firm, and you can have some real mess ups. You got to, and so
there were some recently, right?
Yeah,
they used ChatGPT to
on some
write
briefs.
That's right.
Yeah, made up cases and so. I mean,
they were referencing cases that didn't exist.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the other side is looking. Where are these cases? I can't.
AI thought, hey, this is fine. This is what you do, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So obviously you have to work, but some of the things that you see that are being embedded or being used, like in manufacturing or logistics, the like, can do tremendous things, save a lot of time, open up avenues in medicine, like. But again, all those also create legal challenges. Like, for example, let us say that you have AI, which can you can do all these scans. You could do it through Watson and a lot of others. You could do these scans on X-rays, mm-hmm. and they'll see things or identify things that even a very experienced a doctor would not necessarily be able to pick up on without a little bit more effort. But they also, let's just say that image is just a little bit off, and there's a wrong diagnosis made on the basis of the prompts. Well, who's responsible? Mm. How's that going to be responsible? So the idea is about, where liability should be, how do you allocate risk? Where do you put the guardrails, and then also, how we go about making decisions. All incredibly important. And so this is a ripe area, and for a lot of both legal and technical risk.
So you might have an AI bot as a client.
There you go. I might go back to my office and have an AI bot giving me a bunch of work to do. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that is just that AI is being used as a tool to augment, right?
Right.
And so, because I do think that, and I've heard many stories where doctors are missing, critical information in the X-ray because, it turns out they are very hard to read. Every time I've looked at one, I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
And then after the fact, they're like, well, doc, I've been going here every 6 months for the past 5 years, and now you say I've got stage 4. It's like, what happened? And my last X-ray was fine. Well, actually, if I go back and look, I should have caught it here and here, right?
Yeah.
And so, whereas AI, if it could at least circle and identify and hone in the focus of the tech on, look at these 5 areas, and the progression. Like reading one X-ray is hard, but let's look at the 5 or 6 X-rays, the progression of it, and you have the AI pick up that and say, pay attention to this area here instead of trying to learn the whole thing.
Exactly, and that is a wonderful example for where great progress can be made, where you still have the human judgment there. They say, like you say, augment, identify, give the information so that someone who has the judgment, seen a lot of it, and is going to have to do. So it's one thing to identify, but then you got to do something about it. What is the right approach? So having that ability to see, but also draw on that judgment about how we can address this problem, because that is the core. That's what the patient wants, and so that to me is a tremendous example of what could be really go right with what could go and make us better, make us better, faster, smarter.
Yeah, and you don't want the legal implications to get in the way of that progress.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
And because I do think it's just going to open up all kinds of, it seems silly now actually to have a doctor that has to spend 15 years memorizing a bunch of stuff that's also instantly outdated, right? So you really want to train doctors, I think, differently in using the relevant data to make a diagnosis instead of trying to remember all the case history of X and Y and Z diseases or something like
exactly.
that.
And you also want to make sure that it doesn't become a crutch in a way that this is all identified, that's something to do. Some of the best doctors, and I'm sure you've had this experience too. They're watching you as you walk in, and they can identify that there's something off a little bit here that you might not even come in for, you're not even claim. So a doctor gets to gestalt a situation, and there's a lot more that can go in. So you want to make sure that the doctors are trained for that too, but also can use those tools and use them effectively. And what an exciting time! What an exciting time to be.
We're in the future.
Yeah.
At Softtech, we don't just follow the trends; we set them. As the founder and CEO, I've built a team that excels in delivering cutting-edge solutions in software, hardware, and IoT. From concept to completion, we're the partner that turns your tech dreams into reality. Softtech, where innovation starts. So if I'm a founder, what should I be concerned with for IP protection, for example?
So I think that's a really crucial question. And so one of the things you need to do is, just baseline, is every consultant that's working on your tech, they might very well have existing IP. You got to realize that they're not going to give you their IP, but you want to make sure that you get the fruits of that, and that's documented. A lot of times, what'll happen is we'll see that there aren't invention assignment agreements that have been signed by the folks who've been working on that, the employees, the consultants who are work for hire. They haven't done an assignment, because if they are work for hire, they're independent contractors, and guess what? They have rights. They have rights as authors, and that you might have an implied license, but you don't have ownership. So there are lots of things like that where you get your baseline agreements and you think about it and you do that carefully. And there are going to be pushbacks. There might have to be some alterations in some particular cases, but that is, for everyone who's starting up, you want to make sure you have that documented, because sometimes you can't necessarily fix that later on. You get in your round and you have some lawyer say, well, wait a minute, who had anything to do with this and how come it's not documented? So that's not the time you want to go back and fix it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think that a lot of founders think, oh, patents, that's what you're talking about. And that's not necessarily true. And you might patent it later.
Right.
But we've had large clients and had to go through that, like basically following the IP assignment from the employment agreement through the contractor, through the vendor, sometimes in particular countries, right? And then how that gets transferred to the client ultimately, and that in a way that they can then defend it. And so they're looking at the laws of the country that you're nowadays. So we've got developers in 22 different countries, for example.
Wow.
Right? And so, you're going to have resources in, Eastern Europe or whatever, and it's like, what are the IP protection laws there, for example?
Yes.
Like, who owns the IP? And then later, you're going to want to maybe patent that. And that does cost real money. I remember when I was at Compact, they realized that they were behind on the number of patents that they had, because the patent portfolio is also a defense mechanism, right?
Right.
So, and I think IBM, I don't know how many years now is IBM the top IP patent company by a large margin. So you're basically trying to build a patent portfolio that can defend against, once you do cross a patent at some point in time, you then start looking at your own patent portfolio and say, well, okay, you cross this one, we cross that one. Let's just cross-license our patent portfolio, right?
Right.
So they made a huge consolidated effort on trying to understand, like, well, what's patentable,
right?
But you have to start from, again, like you said, from the beginning.
Right.
You don't want the employee or the contractor to have that, IP epiphany that you had, and now you don't own it, and that can actually be worth, millions of dollars.
Absolutely. Right? And to your point, you don't know what you may want to patent or file a copyright registration on, or at least in part, or what you might want to do. You have no earthly idea. But a lot of the things that you do at the very beginning influence what you can and can't do. So it's important just to realize that and keep that in mind. And the thing about it is that patents, there's an ebb and flow in terms of the real strength or viability, if you will, of patents. You have sometimes where the courts do not give as much effect to them. Sometimes they give a lot. Sometimes you go overboard. You see this ebb and flow in the law, and that happens in a lot of areas of law, antitrust, others. So you don't know quite whether, when at the time you're thinking, well, maybe I can get a patent, whether it's going to be worth enforcing or whatever. You might keep it, like you say, as a defensive move to cross license. So, but you want to keep as many options as you have for what you're building in your technology.
And then what's your firm's approach to that? How are you forging the future in innovation protection?
So we have a great set of IP lawyers. I cross over with a bit of that. I'm not a patent lawyer. But what we do is when we advise, there are some companies, as you know, like IB is one, but we represent a manufacturer, for example, and the founder owner of that business, a very successful business, is always filing patents. He has a great belief in patents. But he also really knows what he's trying to accomplish. So what we try to do is just figure out what it is they're accomplishing, not just getting a patent just because you can get it up on the wall. You want to say, what is the strategy? And that's what we sit down and try to figure out is what is going to be the next? What are the type of objections that we can expect to have? Where is it? But what are the claims? How are we going to navigate that? But also, what am I going to build the portfolio around? So again, an example is, don't forget about trademarks, because the trademarks, trade dress, those sort of things, that can identify the product as well, and they can be incredibly valuable. And so, people get fixated on a certain type of IP. Don't think about the IP. Think what it is that is going to be valuable in the marketplace, and then let's build a portfolio, a strategy around that.
I've known founders before that just put TM on a bunch of stuff.
Yes, they do.
Does that work?
Yeah. So there is a concept of common law trademark. So trademark rights arise by use. So if you use it in commerce, and you can eventually get a registration potentially at the Patent and Trademark Office. What that gives you is protection around the country. But you can have common law. Actually, states have their own trademark regimes, but you can have a common law right. What that does is, in your market, in your area where you're actually using it, you might have some trademark rights. Even as against someone who later on files for trademark registration. But then what you're doing is you have those possibilities for conflict and the like. It's not a bad idea to put TMs on things because on initial stages to figure out while you're figuring out what's doing, because marks, as you know, people change them. People kind of move around. They don't necessarily do, and they don't get necessarily invested in them. But at some point, it makes sense to build up that portfolio and to think about it in tandem with the rest of the IP protection, whether it's trade secret protection, whether it's patents, copyrights, whatever it might be. Think about what is it that I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah.
So at what point, if I'm a founder, should I be starting to talk to a lawyer?
So we get them at all different stages. I tell you what is best is really give some thought to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. What is the business behind that before you start forming companies and doing all this stuff. If you want to form a company, you can do that early on. And like say, lots of firms have a startup package, and it's not very expensive, and you can do that sometimes on your own. But what I would say is that what you want to do is make sure you got a good concrete plan in your own mind. It's going to change. It will definitely change as you talk to investors, and then you might want to talk to a lawyer briefly about what is it that I need to have in my toolbox as I'm going to knock on doors. That's when it's important for people to understand. It's even if you're going to friends and family. Some of the toughest fights that you have to kind of unpack sometimes are when people have expectations as in the friends and family round, and it's not been documented, and then you're losing energy when you should be doing liftoff. I guess one of the takeaways that I want people really to realize is that, especially in Houston or around Houston, yes, there's Boston and there's Silicon Valley and there's Austin and there's all these other things. But this is an amazing place, and lots of great things are happening. So this is a place where I think entrepreneurs really can succeed. This has been very welcoming for decades to younger companies growing up. I mean, people have made and lost fortunes in this city, but because there aren't as many barriers. There's an openness to it. So just keep that in mind. This is a fantastic place.
Yeah, Texas is a very business-friendly state.
Yep.
You see a lot of people coming here, and then my experience in Houston has been great.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You've been here since '81, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Don't plan to leave.
No. Well, thanks for being on.
Absolutely.
A lot of good information. I think the point is, founders should definitely consider the legal part of what they're building, and getting good advice from an attorney or a firm is good advice.
There you go. That's right.
One of the most important things I always think about, a lawyer told me a long time ago, was keep your own hands clean. So if you just operate in a way, and with the knowledge in these, as you operate your business and your life, that you imagine standing in front of a judge and having to explain your actions.
Absolutely.
You try to have as few things as possible on your side. Well, he did this and he did that.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
I keep that in mind all the time.
I tell you, I was just talking to someone where it was actually an investor, and what they found out is that that the guy who was wanted to sell the business or have them invest in, on the side he was taking assets out, starting up a side business. And you just sit there and say, why? I mean, why do that? I mean, and so it's I would not have a job if people didn't sin. I mean, both priests and lawyers depend on people sinning. So don't get me wrong. I don't want anyone to stop sinning soon. But if you try to keep that in mind, things will fall off sometimes here and there, and you don't know. But yeah, was good and sound advice.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on. I do have some socks for you.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Unfortunately, most of my socks were tech-related, not legal related. You might find these funny.
Okay.
Leave me alone. I'm pretending to work.
I love that. I love that. I love that. That is I definitely going to wear these.
Maybe it's for the COVID times. I don't know.
I know. You know what? I think this is a great thing to have. I kind of hide. Then I can hide a little bit easier. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great.
I know how important staying informed is for innovation and growth. The Forging the Future newsletter brings you the best in tech trends, startup advice, and industry insights. Join our community and forge your future with us. Subscribe now.